A neurosurgeon sits across from his lawyer, late in a year that had already taken almost everything from him. The paperwork is open on the desk between them. You don't have to give it away, the lawyer says. Legally, it's yours to keep. $30 million sitting in a trust with his name on it. Enough to erase every debt this man had, and at that moment, he had plenty. He looks at the papers for a long moment, the kind of silence where an entire life seems to run through someone's head at once. Then he says 4 words that will end up funding a research center at one of the most respected universities on Earth. Give it away anyway. To understand why a man standing on the edge of financial ruin would choose to lose everything twice in one lifetime, we have to go back almost 40 years to a 12-year-old boy pedaling a bicycle as fast as his legs could carry him, away from a house he could not stand to be inside of for one more minute. That boy's name was James Doty. His father drank unpredictably, which meant the house could turn from silence to shouting with almost no warning at all. His mother had suffered a stroke, was partially paralyzed, and battled a depression so severe it had nearly taken her life. The family had been evicted more than once. They lived on public assistance, moving whenever the money simply ran out. There was no map out of any of this, only chaos, and a boy who had learned far too early to brace himself for whatever came next through the front door. So on the bad days, and there were a lot of bad days, James got on his bike and rode. Far, fast, anywhere that wasn't home. One of those rides took him further than usual, past streets he didn't recognize, to a strip mall on the edge of town, and a small magic shop he had never once noticed before. He'd lost the plastic thumb he used for card tricks, and he went inside looking for a replacement. Instead, he found a woman in her 50s, reading a paperback behind the counter, minding the shop for her son while he ran an errand. They talked for 20 minutes about magic tricks and nothing in particular. Then, out of nowhere, she said something no adult had ever bothered to say to him before. "I really like you," she told him. "I think I can help you. I'm here for 6 more weeks. If you show up every day, I think you could learn a lot." He had absolutely no idea what she meant, but he had nothing else to do, and she kept a jar of chocolate chip cookies on the counter, so he showed up every single day for 6 weeks straight. What she taught him in that back room wasn't card tricks at all. It was how to sit still inside his own body for the first time in his life, how to breathe until the constant noise in his chest finally went quiet. And on the very last day, once the relaxation and the focus had settled in, she asked him to do one more thing, make a list. 10 things he wanted out of his life. A poor 12-year-old's list in 1968. Be a millionaire. Own a mansion. Drive a Porsche. Wear a Rolex. And become a doctor. Decades later, he had every single item on that list, and then some. A Stanford Neurosurgeon. A successful medical entrepreneur running his own companies, a house overlooking the bay, a villa in Florence, a garage full of the exact cars a poor 12-year-old once dreamed about at night. Friends told him constantly how great his life looked from the outside. And by his own account, standing in the middle of all of it, he had never in his entire life felt more miserable. Neuroscientists have a name today for what that woman in the magic shop was teaching a frightened 12-year-old, decades before any of it had a name at all. The very first thing she corrected wasn't his posture or his breathing. It was the voice in his head insisting he wasn't good enough, wasn't worthy of any of it. That voice, she told him, wasn't truth. It was only a story, repeated so many times it had started to feel like fact. The first Hermetic Law calls this mentalism. The world you experience begins as thought, long before it ever becomes anything else. As within, so without. The oldest line in Hermetic teaching, and it turns out, the exact shape of what was already happening inside that boy's head. He would later describe negative self-talk as laying bricks, one at a time. Every "I'm not enough," every "nothing ever works out for me." Another brick in a wall that kept climbing higher until the room he lived in got darker and darker. A prison, built entirely from the inside, brick by brick, with a door that, the whole time, was never actually locked. But there's a second layer sitting just beneath the thoughts, one that isn't abstract at all, one you can actually measure with a machine. Every human nervous system runs in one of two modes: fear mode, wired for danger and built to keep you alive, or heart mode, wired for connection and built for everything else worth having. He would spend the rest of his career teaching people to feel the difference, one slow breath at a time. The third Hermetic Law: nothing in the universe is ever still. Everything vibrates, including you, including the energy you're putting out into a room before you've said a single word. By every material measure anyone could point to, the boy from the magic shop had already won. Millionaire, check. Mansion, check. Porsche, check. Doctor, check. Every single item crossed off the list a desperate 12-year-old once wrote in a strip mall magic shop. And somehow, he still felt completely empty. Polarity, the fourth law, says wealth and emptiness were never really opposites. They're the same axis, just measured at two different points. And nothing about how he got from one point to the other happened in a straight line. He didn't build a meditation practice overnight, and he didn't build a career overnight either. A small habit repeated on ordinary days. That's the only kind of change that ever survives contact with a real, messy life. Everything that rises will eventually fall, and everything that falls will eventually rise again. The fifth law, rhythm, running quietly underneath every single year of this story. Here's the part of the story that isn't mysticism at all. It's a mechanism, and he could draw you an actual diagram of it on a whiteboard. Write the intention down on paper, read it silently, say it out loud, picture it happening in vivid detail again and again. Every repetition lays the same neural circuit down a little deeper, until the brain can barely tell the difference between a vivid memory and a vivid plan. Cause and effect, the sixth law. Every cause carries its effect inside it already. Repetition is the cause. The wiring of a new belief is the effect. One more law was quietly working underneath every one of the others, and it took him almost 40 years to actually notice it. The drive to achieve, to build, to prove something to the world That was the part of him doing all the pushing, all the climbing. But something far gentler had been growing underneath it, since that very first afternoon in the magic shop, quietly waiting for the right moment to finally be born. Gender, the seventh law, says it's in everything, a driving force and a receiving force, and both are required to create anything that actually lasts. And on one ordinary afternoon, in a lawyer's office, years after the mansion and the Porsche and the villa in Florence, every single one of these 7 laws was about to collide at once in a single decision. It started at the very top of the dot-com boom, years after Stanford, years after the surgical career was already established. He had it all. The mansion over the bay, a Ferrari, a Porsche, a Range Rover, a BMW, a Mercedes, the villa in Florence, and by every friend's account, a life most people would kill for. Then the crash came all at once, the way these things usually do. $80 million gone. $3 million in debt, with a $15 million loan still hanging directly over his head, and creditors who wanted answers immediately. One by one, he sold almost everything he owned. The cars, one at a time, the house on the bay, nearly every single item the 12-year-old on that original list had ever wanted so badly, now going out the door to strangers. This is Correspondence again, the same law from the magic shop, only now running in reverse. What was collapsing on the outside was simply catching up to something that had quietly been true on the inside for years. Because years earlier, while he was still chasing the mansion and the Porsche, he had set up a charitable trust, mostly, he'd admit, much later, for the tax advantage it offered him at the time. He had moved a block of company stock into that trust, and in the chaos of the financial collapse, the final paperwork transferring that stock permanently out of his hands was never actually completed. So his lawyer sat him down and delivered what should have sounded like the best news he'd heard in months. You don't have to give it away. You can just keep it. $30 million, and it's entirely yours, legally. Fear mode would have grabbed it without a second thought. Every alarm in a nervous system on the edge of collapse, screaming at him to hold on tight. Instead, he sat with the decision. Polarity at its absolute sharpest point. The same man who once wanted a Porsche just to feel important, now choosing, at the single lowest financial moment of his life, to give away the one thing that could have saved him. He told the lawyer to go ahead, give every dollar of it away. That $30 million became the founding gift for a research center at Stanford, one built specifically to study compassion itself, scientifically, under his direction. The Dalai Lama became its founding benefactor. The boy who once wanted nothing more than a mansion had quietly built something that would outlast every house he would ever own. He used to tell people the universe doesn't actually care about you. Not because there's nothing out there, but because the power was never out there to begin with. It was always sitting inside the 7 laws, already running through you, whether you'd ever learned their names or not. Dr. James Doty passed away in July of 2025, but the mechanism he spent his entire life mapping, the one that turned a boy on a bicycle into a man who gave away a fortune doesn't need him alive to keep working. It's running inside you right now, in this exact moment, whether you've ever bothered to name it or not. So, now that you've seen exactly how these 7 laws moved through one man's entire life, where are they already moving through yours? Tell us in the comments below. If this story reached you the way it was meant to, send it right now to someone who needs to hear it today. And if you want more of the 7 Hermetic Laws, decoded through real stories exactly like this one, subscribe to the Kybalion Effect. We'll see you in the next one.